Probably should have asked Kate that.
Hello, we're live. And I think on LinkedIn we can share it on our profile once goes live. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll let some people join in on the webinar. My name is Liran Hirschkorn from Incrementum Digital. I'm here with Robert. I don't want to butcher your last name, Robert.
Principe. We'll say it in the American version. Principe.
Okay, I was gonna say Principe, but I was worried. I was worried about saying it in the American version.
No problem.
Yeah, maybe Robert, give us a brief introduction about who you are, what you do, and then I'll do the same, and we'll get started with the webinar on 5 mistakes to avoid when hiring an agency.
Wonderful. Before I start, do you hear music in the back, or is that just me, Liran?
I do, but no longer. And
okay,
maybe
perfect.
Our team in the background doing some stuff.
Perfect. We obviously practice this a lot, guys.
Yes.
Hi, Rob Principe here. I've been in CPG for 15 years. I've been in e-com for the last 11, splitting that time between the brand and the agency side. So I've been on both sides of the desk from a evaluation, management, and negotiating perspective. I recently launched eTail Advisors to leverage that experience and work with small to medium-sized brands on evaluating their e-commerce business, figuring out if they need a third-party service provider, and if so, at what level, and then kind of shepherding them through that process to make it more efficient and do everything in my power to ensure that they find the right partner. I met Liran and the team about a month and a half to 2 months ago, and I was thoroughly impressed. And so we decided to partner, and they were kind enough to invite me to this webinar.
Yes, and you have also a history in the past of working with Kate Bray, who's our VP of Marketing. I think you guys were over at
NetRush,
same agency some years back.
Yes. I think we overlapped by a couple of months, but people knew her very well there, and I heard several times you need to connect with Kate. So I made that choice, and it was a smart decision.
Amazing. Great. And my name is Liran Hirschkorn. I'm CEO, founder of Incrementum Digital. We help brands scale on retail media platforms, mostly Amazon, Walmart, and we're also starting to manage on other platforms like Target, Kroger, Instacart. And prior to really focusing on the agency side, I was an Amazon brand owner, Amazon seller myself with private label brands that I developed. And prior to that, I was in the online insurance space. So, combined, we have a lot of years within e-commerce, and very specifically also agency and Amazon, and we wanted to bring you some of the mistakes and then also best practices that we see when it comes to selecting an agency. And from my perspective, sometimes I see the process of how people are working with us and select working with us, and I say, wow, they really know how to go about this process of selecting the right agency. And other times I don't necessarily see brands following that process. And so when I get these really good questions from brands, I'm like, okay, they have experience. They've probably had a poor experience in the past, and they've probably learned from it. And so what we're trying to do is share both our experiences and also help you avoid the mistakes in terms of hiring the wrong agency. So Robert, you actually kind of help put together. Maybe we can kind of go into what these top 5 mistakes are, and then we can dive into each one of them.
Absolutely. So know thy goals. It's super important to know what you want from not just your service provider, but what you want from the process. Stranger danger, it helps to know somebody. The proposal, what goes into that and what you get out of that is very important. Kate, who is leading the charge here, I see quick comment from a Sarah Remy. It says my screen says the event will start soon. Is it actually broadcasting?
No, it is. Yeah, I see
Oh,
it.
okay.
I see it
All right.
live.
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure that nobody was missing it. Perfect. Okay. And then agency monogamy, figuring out if it's the right one for you, and then referral reliance, when it's a good idea, how it's a good idea, and when it may not be a good idea. And then Q&A. We'll probably go for at least 45 minutes. It may have said 12 to 12:30, but I hope you guys budgeted some time to go at least 45 minutes, because we think and hope that you will have some questions to wrap up in the end. And we will also send a follow-up email with some details and then some special offers for some discounts on some popular platforms. So
Amazing.
That's what we got. So let's dive on in. This is my favorite slide, which may surprise you guys because I get to talk on the other slides. And if you know Rob, I don't mind talking. This just paints a really good picture of what brands are looking at. And the reason why we started e-tail advisors was because of this right here. It is just so overwhelming if you're a small brand or even a medium-sized brand to look at the landscape and figure out who's good, who's not, who's good at some things and not good at others, who knows my vertical, who knows marketplaces compared to direct to consumer. Can one agency do it all? And it's overwhelming. And I hear that a lot. I will ask Liran, from your perspective, running an agency, has this change been overwhelming as far as the amount of competition and cutting through the noise and, really showing brands what's different / special about your agency?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I wouldn't say overwhelming, but I would say both. I think for us and for clients, there's definitely an aspect of shiny object syndrome, right? Oh, there's a new software, like you should try this. Okay, but like we're really focused on this. Like, why are we jumping to this? Is it because of a shiny object syndrome? Is it, so I think that's part of it. And like what you said is, who's good and who's not good. And sometimes it's not even a question of who's good and who's not good, is who's good for you. Who's the right fit for you. And I'll give you an example. We had a client that recently came on board, and for us, they're pretty, like, I would say, like, not our biggest client, but bigger than our average. And they were with another agency prior, and they told me some things, and I went back to somebody else that I know knows them well and stuff, and I said, how come they weren't getting X, Y, and Z at this agency from what they told me? And saying, oh, well, because for that agency, they're very small fish. That's a huge company, and they're very small fish, and they were probably not getting the love and attention. So it could be that that agency is very good, but maybe if you are 3x the size, you get the right attention.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if you're not necessarily, because that's not their ideal customer profile. And that's okay. Like maybe he wasn't at the right place, but it could be that that agency performs well for a lot of people, a lot of brands. But in his case, he wasn't getting the love, so to speak. For us, that client is larger than our average size, right? So it's gonna have a different experience. So I think that's a factor of knowing, if you're in the right place. And yes, there are so many options today between agencies, between software, and now AI. And there's so many shiny objects that you could get lost in all of it and trying things and jumping and skipping around and, shiny object syndrome, as opposed to just really staying focused and finding out, like, is this something we should even look at? Is this something we should even consider? And that's kind of like this map is, crazy on the differences in, not a long period of time, from 100 companies to 11,000. And it's, you'd think for people that are in this space on an everyday basis, let's say in the agency space, that are looking at this maybe, and then you think brand owners who have so many, or executives in brands that have so many other things to worry about besides just marketing, operations and logistics, and product development and finance, right? And this is just one small or one aspect of their business. And yes, it can get very overwhelming. And so it sort of like you have more choices today, but you know what they say, like in marketing, when somebody has too many choices, they don't make a decision, right? Sometimes like when you know, software company shows people 3 options, good, middle, best, like that's easy. But if you showed people 7 options of like your monthly pricing plan or 7 products instead of 3, that person might not choose anything at all or might make the wrong decision. And it's kind of a little bit of what I feel like is has been happening. It'd be interesting to hear in the comments from people if you're kind of also feeling overwhelmed with just the abundance of optionality,
Yeah.
you know, that you have. So this is a little bit of like the setup of why we think this conversation is important.
Perfect segue. Perfect segue, Liran. It's like you've done this before. It's perfect.
You know. Yeah, let's go maybe cover this slide.
Yeah. So the 2 most important concerns from CMOs over the past 12 months. So the challenge of integrating emerging solutions. I mean, we cannot turn on the TV, log into YouTube, or scroll our social channels without seeing something about AI, how to use it, how to not use it. It's going to take over the world. It could make you a millionaire in a week, whatever the case may be. It's AI, and more AI. And then again, complex, crowded, and fragmented tech landscape. Last month, I was fortunate enough to attend Expo West, and I probably spoke to about 30 to 35 brands. And even if they weren't satisfied with their current service providers or agency, they were just the thought of making the switch was just so daunting that they were like, oh, it's good enough. Or the devil you know is better.
It's like
than the devil you don't.
Kind of like a relationship, right? sometimes
well, I hope your wife's not on this call.
Yeah, not talking about my personal life.
Okay.
But yeah, sometimes you're, you know, it's like the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. And I agree, you know, it's what you told me is we were kind of talking about prepping for this webinar is like you didn't have this like overwhelmingly positive, a lot of positive, but you found like, okay, yeah, my agency's like good, but like switching would be too much of a pain.
Yeah, which is not good, right? You want the best service provider, and there are real differences within service providers and quality. And hopefully this makes it easier for you guys to choose and move forward with your best option, not just the option you're with already. So if we could jump into the next slide, please.
Okay, so tell us about this mistake. Know thy goals.
Yes.
Why is this actually? This has, you know, sounds like this has nothing to do with agencies. So like, what's this mistake?
It does. So not knowing what your goals are. So a lot of times when I was on the agency side, we would have a brand that was very interested in finding a new solution, but entered into the conversation vaguely, right? Like when you are trying to figure out what service provider you want to choose, I think it's important to lean back on what Liran was speaking about, meaning what's important to you. How large is your company? How large is the e-com piece of it? What are you trying to focus on? Is it D2C? Is it marketplaces? Is it a specific marketplace? How long do you want the search process to be? Do you want the choice made in 30, 60, and 90 days? Who is in the decision-making process? This may surprise you guys, but I've actually pitched agency services and we got to the end and they were very interested and they didn't know who was going to make the final choice. And it turned into a like jury deliberation where they all went back in a room, and 3-4 weeks later, it was time to say yes, no, or maybe so. time is money for everyone. And if you are looking into switching service providers, there is a reason why. Nobody just wakes up and says, hey, we have nothing on our docket. Let's just go find another service provider. So there's a need there, and chances are it's a pressing need. And so, how long do you want this to take? And how many service providers do you want to speak with? And my favorite saying is, what does it look like if we win? So if everything goes right, what does that look like? And you just work back from there. Begin with the end in mind. The process is about you and your needs. And how are you going to choose a partner based on the goals that you want to achieve in 90 days, 6 months, and the next year? And then you should evaluate that service partner based on your belief and their capacity to hit those goals. Liran, I would love to hear your feedback and your experiences when it comes to this.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like sometimes I think of this as like this question. If you ask most people, like, what do you want in life? They first thing would probably be like, I don't know, right? We often don't think about like what is the outcome that we're looking for. And I think the second bullet here is like not having built-in KPIs. What does success look like? It's a very critical question because it's really going to help align both you and the agency in the right direction and roadmap. And for us, it's very helpful to understand. Let me give you an example actually that happened to me this week. So we had a brand that came to us. They doing about between 6 and 7 million a year in sales on Amazon, and we did an audit of their account. And we typically ask for goals, but I'm not sure if they filled out our form there. But we did an audit of their account, and they came back. They said, "Great, love the audit. Can you help give us like a forecast, of what things will look like if we work together?" And so, okay, so we put together kind of like 3 scenarios, kind of like a conservative, middle, more aggressive. Obviously, it depends if you're going to be more focused on growth or profitability or what we put together. And we got to a point of, I think on like the middle ground, they did about, 7 million last year. We got to like, potentially hitting closer to 8 million in kind of like our middle ground approach if we implemented some things. And then they came back and they said, wow, we're really disappointed. We're really looking to hit 12 million. Like, wow, we wish we would have known that before we did the forecast, Now, maybe that's on us. Maybe we didn't extract that enough before we went out to do a forecast. At the same time, it would be great to know that, because if we know that you're looking to go from 7 million to 12 million, we're going to put together a much different plan than, kind of going back on like, okay, how is the category growing? How are the trends growing? Plus, what about the optimizations and the sort of added value that we're going to add, and like where can we get to, whatever. But now if we know you're trying to go from here to here, well, we're going to put together a very different plan, right? So not having that conversation early on, because also we may come back and say, okay, guys, look, if you want to hit 12 million, you're going to have to do X, Y, Z. And maybe that brand is not prepared to do that. And then maybe we figure out that it's not a good fit. Or maybe we tell them like, look, in order to have 12 million, you're going to need to own X% of the market share. And it's not really doable. We had a client once that was selling 1,000 units a month of a product, like $100 plus product. And they told us, look, guys, sorry, but our goal is to have 5,000 units a month. And we went back and we did the work, and we came back to them like, well, were you aware that in order to sell 5,000 units a month, you need to own 75% market share, right? So aligning on this together will really help us take in this data and then be able to present it and then figure out like, look, this is going to be very challenging or this is doable. And when you align together as partners, then I think you can make some magic happen. And when everyone is aligned on those goals, and see if the goal is realistic and doable. And I think many times those conversations maybe they're not being done, at least as part of the selection process. And that's when you can have then a mismark, because imagine we didn't have this conversation with this brand, they wouldn't have told us this. We would start working and they're like, look, we're nowhere close to, they would have this expectation that maybe it's normal for a brand to go from 7 to 12 million in a year, and you know, we're off the mark because of that, or something because of that. And like understanding those objectives ahead of time is really important. And you know, and I think also for I don't know if it's in the mistakes, but you also have to understand, you know, what kind of client are you for that agency? You know, are you going to be the largest client of the agency? Are you going to be the smallest client? Are you going to be right in the middle? Like understanding how you align in terms of who the agency likes to, you know, generally works with is also really important. And we really, I would say, very, very uncommon for a brand to even ask me that question. Where would we fit in, you know, in terms of like, in terms of the agency? Because I don't mind being like, if I'm going to work with a service provider, maybe I don't mind being the largest customer, but what if I'm the largest customer by 500% compared to their second one? Well, maybe they don't typically work with brands like mine, with accounts like mine. And I need to understand if that's going to be a fit or not a fit. So there's a lot of things in, I think, understanding what your goals are early on that are really important.
Yes. The process is yours, so own it. All right. So stranger danger. Let's jump right into this slide here. First of all, I love that picture.
Yes. Me too. Yeah. So maybe you could talk us through a little bit of what does that mean, stranger danger? I mean,
danger. Yeah. So if you guys have seen my service or my brand, the tagline is, it's who you know. I'm a big proponent on working with people who you are at least acquainted with or know people who you know. If any of you have ever just done a search for best Amazon agency or best ad agency or whatever the case may be, I don't want to, you know, rain on your parade here, but 90% of those lists are just pay to play. They're fabricated lists. Some of them will even say sponsored right on the list results, which literally means that they're paying to play. So you cannot trust, and I would not trust those lists in any way, shape, or form. With those lists, you don't know their ideal client profile. You don't know where you fit or who they typically work with. You're not going to know if you're their third client, their 300th client, or 3,000th one. It's super important to know that agency's experience, who they work with, what space do they work in, and how you would fit into their grand scheme of things. As for references, this is a little tricky. So when I say ask for references, I would prefer you find your own references. And how do you do that? If you go to most of their websites, you will see a list of people who they work with, a list of logos. Normally, it's their largest brands. And then what you could do is cross-reference who you know on LinkedIn, and feel free to ping those people. Getting a reference from an agency is like getting a reference for somebody who you will hire. They're going to give you their biggest fans, their favorite boss. They're going to give you their best customer. You could do it. I just don't know how much value will be in it. So what I would do is just find your own reference list. And I think that would add a lot more weight. And brands need to know who their decision maker is from both sides. Meaning, if an agency is pitching you, who is on those pitch calls? Is it just salespeople? Is it subject matter experts? Is it somebody in sales leadership? As you go through that process, who is going to say yes to the partnership if you want to change the terms or negotiate the price or a start date or a fee waived? Are the right people on that call and in that process? And that's important, because if you want to get this done in a set amount of time and make this process efficient, you don't want to feel like you're buying a used car where you're speaking with the guy on the lot and he's like, let me go talk to my boss. And then he comes back again. I don't know if we did that. What if we throw in the hubcaps? whatever the case may be. The second most important part of the agency search, the first part is obviously finding the right fit. The second most important part is doing it as efficiently as you can. And if you're not speaking with the right people, then you're speaking with the wrong people. And we have Mike Corey from Commerce IQ here, show a lot of their logos. Yeah, yes, it's a great resource. And a lot of times those logos don't work with that agency anymore.
Right.
Not necessarily a bad thing,
Right.
but that's a great way to find out why they left and what happened. I mean, use LinkedIn for what it's for. It's to network. Use it
Right.
for that. Do you
Yeah.
have something to add there, Liran?
Yeah, I totally agree. And you know, if you were going to find a heart surgeon, yeah, you probably would want to know some cases, right, of what they have done. You probably wouldn't be going just off a Google search. At least, you would verify, right? You would be taking it very seriously. So the same thing, right? I mean, hopefully you wouldn't just do a Google search, find an agency and go work with them without doing any additional work. Also, a lot of us are in different networking groups, with either within LinkedIn or outside, in networking groups, etc. It's one of the big benefits of going to events, meeting people. Yeah, do your do your research and inquire and find out. I love when I get questions from brands on some of the stuff we'll cover here. Who will I be working with? Can I meet them? Going deeper, even asking for references for me is not such a common occurrence of people asking. But I love when people do ask. It shows me that they're serious in their search, and that when they make a decision, it's hopefully they're not looking to make a decision and then go through this process again in 2 months. So they're taking the process seriously, and when they make a decision, hopefully they're making a good decision. So I love to see brands that are taking this search seriously.
Wonderful. Next slide, please. The proposal. Okay, so let's jump into this real fast. All right, so a big mistake is allowing yourself not to get a detailed proposal / scope of work. So if you took step one seriously and you know your goals and your KPIs and your timelines, the proposal should reflect that. And the proposal should reflect that with a path to it. How long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? What needs to happen, whether it's copy, content, catalog, what actions have to happen off platform. Guys, it's 2024. There are no longer Amazon customers or Walmart customers or brick and mortar customers. It's all the same shopper. And it may turn out that the best way for you to grow is to ramp up your social media efforts, not more money on Amazon or whatever the case may be. And if you're speaking with a quality service provider who not just wants to know your business, but knows the business, then
Right.
whatever your goals are, there should be a guided path, a dotted line right to those goals. And that should be reflected in the proposal. And the amount of work and exactly what work it's going to take to get there should be reflected within the scope.
And by the way, I to jump in, I can't tell you how many times I hear somebody that that comes to us and said, by the way, I went to like 2 or 3 other websites or this company or that company, and I submitted a form and I never heard back. So like,
Yes.
meaning, what does that mean, right? It means that when you go in and ask for this proposal, you can also kind of even get a gauge on, is the agency themselves timely? Do they put something together in a very
Mhm.
professional way? Are they addressing the things that we asked to be addressed that are important to us? Can they reiterate back the goals that we said we were interested in the first place, right? It's in a lot of ways, first of all, it's a good document to get aligned on so that you don't have confusion on ultimately what you're going to get, what the goals are,
Mhm.
what work will be done and what work won't be done, to make sure there's no confusion. And two, you get to see how responsive an agency is, how they communicate with you. Um, there's a lot of benefit just to go through that process in terms of like, what is it like to interact with this, with this agency? Do they have their act together? Do they not have their act together? And then, yes, definitely in terms of, you know, um, it's happened to us. It's happened in other cases. Oh, I thought that was part of the service, right? And maybe it's not part of the service, right? So like making sure you're super aligned on what's
Mhm.
included, what's not included, what the goals are. And there's nothing I think more powerful than putting something down in writing, in terms of like a vision for what you're looking for. Um,
Correct. Correct.
this should be in every part of the process, every
Correct.
agency selection process.
And the next bullet is super important as well. Chances are the people who are pitching you are the best and the brightest and the smartest. And chances are those people will not be working on your account. In fact, it's probably a red flag if they are working on your account because it's probably a very small service provider. Um, as you get towards the end of the process, either you've given a verbal agreement or you're at red lines on the contract, be sure to ask to meet your team. Who is going to be working with us, not just for a hard skills fit, but a soft skills fit. It's basic knowledge that we work better with people who we like. And you don't have to be best friends, but you have to be friendly. And I think it's very important to know who you're going to work with, not just your account manager, but if you will be speaking with subject matter experts or someone in leadership or whatever the case may be, get familiar with them, get comfortable with them, and don't be afraid to ask them the same questions that you ask leadership. Maybe see if those answers are maybe a little bit different. It's a great way to kind of suss out what's correct and what's not. The third bullet point is pay attention to all language, eliminate the fluff, eliminate the fluff words. Listen, a lot of these service providers are marketers by nature. They like to be hyperbolic. It's just in it's just in their DNA, right? So if it's all fluff, it's a huge red flag. If there's a lot of fluff, just try to cut through it and just really see how much meat is on that bone. And this last tip is Liran's. Record your calls, record your calls, record your calls. It saves time. You could socialize it within your company if leadership wants to hear it, if you want to hear it again, whatever the case may be. Um, if Liran said that they would do something and now they're not saying it, all you have to do is pull up the call, whatever the case may be. A lot of times the agencies will record them for training purposes. Don't be afraid to ask.
Yep. And
What tool?
yeah, we
Mhm.
besides it, I mean, we do, I do most of my calls in Zoom, and some of our team does it in Google Meet, but you can record it. I also use a tool called Fathom. There's other
Mhm.
ones like it. It's like an, sort of records a transcript. It takes an AI summary. It's excellent tool because I can go back to a meeting I had with a brand, 3 months ago. Let's say we had a meeting 3 months ago and a brand comes back and says, "Hey, we'd like to re-explore, talk to you guys again," and go back to the meeting and I can see the summary. Using AI, I could see a summary of what we spoke about. I can get familiar with the conversation that we had. And yes, this is also something that you can obviously reference back when you're working together. But all the things, if you asked about pricing and they mentioned on the call and you don't remember that 2 or 3 weeks down the line because maybe you don't have it in an email or in a proposal, then you can go back and do a quick search in your transcript for fees or pricing. And then you can immediately find that. It makes things so much easier. Obviously, you can also, we recently went through a process where, we had several calls with a brand, and then they said, "Oh, we didn't record," and we were using their Teams and not our system, and like, "Oh, we didn't record the call," and we learned a lesson here because now like leadership asked to find out more information and we can't just like hand them over the call, right? Like, can you guys do a meeting with leadership? So record all your calls, and if you can use tools, that would be even better, because you can get like AI summary. A lot of these tools are also free. And yeah, researching, Michael says researching agency partnerships. Card.com just bought Amify, the Profitero, there's Publicist, Flywheel, OMD, right? Like, find out all the relationships between who owns a company, do they own software companies, etc. What are the relationships? What are potentially biases? Things like that are all. It's another great tip of what's important. Okay, let's go to the next.
I love the ideas and the conversation in here because nobody knows all of these. So thank you, Michael, very much for adding. Really appreciate it. So mistake number 4, agency monogamy. All right. So too many or too few agencies pitch at once. I strongly recommend, especially if you're looking for a full service provider. So if it's a marketplace, think copy, content, catalog, brand protection, of course, advertising. If you're looking at an all-in-one service provider and you're speaking to more than 3, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. It is going to elongate the process. It's going to cloud the process. And chances are, if you are in a larger org where more people will be involved in that process, it's going to get very confusing very quickly. The good part about having 2 or 3 is competition gives insight and leverage. So chances are, if 3 service providers are pitching to you, they will each do an audit. And again, I keep going back to number 1. If you were clear about your goals and your KPIs and you want to know how you will get there, or even, fact check them, like with your budget, is that even possible? It's going to be a huge value add to see what company A, B, and C are saying. Are they similar? Are they disparate? Are the budgets different? Whatever the case may be. And you could kind of fact check them. And don't be afraid to tell them that you're speaking with another service provider. This will let them know that there's competition, and they have to really be on their A game, not just with their services and their proposals, but with their pricing as well. I speak with a lot of brands who will say, yes, we're speaking with 2 others. Tell them who. Tell them, hey, we're speaking with Momentum Commerce, Incrementum, and somebody else. So they know exactly who they're going against and what that agency's strengths and weaknesses are. It'll really give you a lot of insight. Sorry, Ryan, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I would say, like, if you are mentioning who you're working with, I would say it's a red flag if, the agency is bashing another agency, right? Like, how the agency even reacts to that, or I think can show you a little bit of mindset
That's a great point.
of the agency, etc. Because if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I'm working with this I'm looking at this agency or this agency, and I'm starting to like bash the competition, let's say, it's probably not a good look, right?
It's definitely not.
I might say, like, again, I might give some insights or what I know, what I don't know. Sometimes people will ask me, what do you know about this agency, etc. And I'll say, okay, I've heard maybe good things, I've heard mixed things, but I'm not going to go and bash another agency. I'm going to try to just shine ourselves and ultimately let the person make the decision in terms of what they're looking at. But yeah, I would say, red flag, if they're doing that. And I think the advice here is great in terms of you want to talk to not just one agency, but if you're going to go through 10 processes, 10 agencies, it's like probably too much. But if you started out with understanding, like in the first, let's say, tips that we gave here, probably not every one of those agencies is the right fit for you in terms of their size, who their ideal clients are, who they typically work with versus what you're looking for full service, a specific service. If you knew or did that work up front, you could already eliminate a lot of the work you have to do and then hone in on, the few, ideal partners for you. And then it's going to be a much easier process for you as a brand to ultimately end up selecting the right, the right ones. And again, some of the research you could do ahead of time in terms of, okay, we're considering this list of 7. And again, if you're in a group, or if you want to ask some people, etc., you might be able to eliminate a few just before you even approach them. If you do the work up front, and you're gonna save yourself, a lot of time and effort in your process, because at the end of the day, I think, like Robert said, speed is money. And sometimes, especially if you're bigger and you have a slower process, it will slow you down further, because you have several decision makers, etc., and different teams that are involved, especially if it's full service. You want to try to move fast, and speaking to too many is not good. Speaking to only one is not good either. You have nothing to compare to.
Yeah. And one more thing before we move on here. In my opinion, it's healthy to tell your current partner that you may be looking. I have spoke with a ton of brands, and they're like, well, we don't want to grant access to our seller central because your email address will show up and then they'll know. So can you do some like zzz@gmail.com? Like, that doesn't look obvious enough. If you're looking, your service provider should know that you're looking, and your service provider should know why you're looking. If it's something they're not doing and you would prefer not to change, maybe it's a situation where they could fix themselves. And it'll also tell you a lot about who they are. If once they find out what their response is, do they just start mailing it in and not working hard because they think you're going to leave? Or do they kind of sit up straight and go, oh, well, we could really lose this brand. What can we do to keep them? Remember, you are the employer. They are the employee. And if you were thinking about letting go of an employee, hopefully there would be a process leading up to that, so nobody would be shocked and surprised. So in my opinion, let them know. Let everybody know. There's nothing to hide or be secretive about. And then referral reliance. So if we could just jump right into this in the essence of time. One of the reasons why I started eTail Advisors was this. Referrals are great. We all get them. You want a plumber, you want an electrician, you want somebody to fix your car. We all get them. But like Liran was saying earlier, somebody who's great for me may not be great for him. If I do $5 million a year with 50 ASINs, and he does $50 million a year with 500 ASINs, and I'm like, I work with ABC service provider, Liran, and they are fantastic. They're cost effective. They hit all their KPIs. They're wonderful. Even if all that is true, doesn't mean that it's the right fit for Liran.
Right.
So as great as it is to go word of mouth and speak to friends and former colleagues and LinkedIn people or whatever the case may be, even if the best intentions are there and truth is being told, it doesn't always mean that that is the right answer. We just made this a thing. You want to, and on the other side, you want to avoid the my cousin Vinny effect, even though he did win the case in the end. It's I know a guy, because again, you will get pigeonholed. That trust may be there, but even if that agency has the best intentions and is doing everything they possibly can, they may not be able to suit your needs. They may be too small and you too big, or you too big and they're too, whatever the case may be. So take referrals with a grain of salt and just cross-reference them. If your friend says they're great, what's their rating online? What do their brands who have worked with them say about them? It all feeds into it. Or of course, you could just shoot me an email and I'll walk you through the entire process. It's literally what I do. I just got to plug myself one time there. So yeah.
Yeah, there we go. We got it on the bottom. Look at that magic.
Thank you very much from that. But yes, in all seriousness, like anything else, they could be an input, but don't allow a referral to be your own.
And I can tell you, Robert, that what you're saying is exactly on point, because we get referrals all the time. That's the biggest, word of mouth, I think, for a lot of agencies. I'm in a group with a lot of agency owners, and one of the biggest blessing and curses for agency is that a lot of the way they grow their business is word of mouth, but then they have a hard time growing it in other ways, right? In other marketing efforts. So a lot of, good agencies do get a lot of word of mouth. We get a lot of word of mouth, but I can tell you that our own referral sources don't always know who's the right fit, because we get referred to somebody and then we see what their needs are and what they're looking for. And we say, look, we're not the right provider for you. And the referral source, refers them to us. And maybe they work with us, or they're a partner that refers, and we're a good fit for the company that referred them, but we're not a good fit for the company that they referred. And so we know for a fact that happens and that exists, and that, if you're if it's an agency that just wants to take any business for the fast cash and revenue, then they could be taking on that client, and it was a referral, and it's not going to end up being a right fit. Hopefully, if you get a referral, it means something. Especially if you get a referral for somebody that's working with an agency, that means something, that should go a long way. But at the same time, everything we covered here, you still want to go through that process. Don't skip the process because you got that. You were referred by Coke, but you're just started your brand, right? It's obviously going to be a very different experience for you, and so we want to make sure that's covered. I think we have some bonus tips. So let's talk a little bit about fee structures and contracts. Should you read the contract?
Yes, read the whole thing and then read it again and then read it again. And a lot of you have legal departments and teams, and they will go through the legalities of it, but it's important to focus on the addendums and the scopes. Look out for setup and termination fees, especially early ones. Don't assume renewal timelines. I've spoken with several brands, especially smaller brands, who went in and signed and assumed that they had a 90-day window to give notice, and they go to give notice, and the service provider is like, oh no, you already re-upped for another year, because that was a 6 months window. Right. Nobody was happy there. And understand the percentages thoroughly. This is super duper important. Service providers and agencies will charge you at different rates. Some will charge you X% of gross revenue. Some will charge you X% of COGS. Some will charge you X% of gross revenue, sans certain costs and deductions. Super important to know where that number is going to come out. And what else you could do is, once you have those detailed numbers and fees, take your goals that you think you will hit and use those numbers against them. And then you will find out what your entire cost and percentage of sales will be. And a lot of times you'll probably find it's not that big of a chunk of money. And lastly, when you see that number, remember, if you're confident in the service provider that you're choosing, that number, it's not a spend, it's an investment. The return should all be right there in front of you. You're finding the service provider for a reason. You chose the service provider for a reason. And if you trust enough to put your pen to paper and start the relationship, then that 3, 4, 5%, whatever that number is, that's your investment. And you should be very happy / excited that you are going to get the return that you think you will.
And I can tell you from experience that sometimes we would have somebody email us, they get their first charge or something, and say, wait, this is not what I was expecting. And then I go back and it's like we have a signature on the fees page of the contract. Like, oh wait, you signed this 4 weeks ago. But you had something in your mind or whatever about what the fee is. And again, generally we always, we haven't had issues where somebody's like, oh yeah, it's totally off, but they don't exactly remember, or maybe they didn't read thoroughly, or maybe they heard something. Like, for example, we have a minimum fee or percentage of ad spend, whichever is greater. Well, sometimes the person just in their mind, our minimum fee is $2,000 a month, for example. They just heard the 2,000. They didn't hear anything else after that. So like, hey, why was I charged this? Well, no, we have a minimum fee or percentage of ad spend, whichever is greater, right? And you sign that page, but in their mind, they just heard that number and that was it. So make sure you read the contract. Make sure you fully understand what the fees are. Make sure you understand, is there, is this a long-term, is there an opt-out period? Is there a trial period where if I'm not happy, I can get out? Or what are the ramifications of that? When do I need a renewal? When do I need to give notice? Put that on your calendar. And yeah, understand what you're being charged, percentages are, etc. We have some additional information for you. This is from you, Robert, I believe. If you scan that QR code, you can get some agency evaluation criteria.
Yes, it's I think this is something that you worked on as well. It's the auditing your Amazon strategy.
Oh, okay. This is an ebook from us. Yes, sorry. Auditing your Amazon strategy,
which you could do yourself with your team, so you don't have to depend on an agency that's pitching you being your one source of truth.
Yep. So we have yes, we create. Sorry, had the wrong thing on my mind, but this is a ebook we created with actually showing you the exact step-by-step process we take when we audit a brand, so that you could do the same thing for your brand. It's a download, and this will really help you look at those things for your own brand. If you sort of want to take a sort of outside approach, right? If I was an agency, what would I be doing now to audit the brand to get an idea of where we can make improvements and how we look? So you can scan that QR code and go there. And I think you also have a few things to offer here. Robert?
That will come through in the follow-up email that you will be getting within the next few days. I think we went a little bit over, but when I'm speaking, that's always going to happen. So thank you so much for attending. If you have any further questions, you could reach me on LinkedIn, Principe at etailadvisors.com, or give me a call at 813-892-6532. I am happy to chat and talk shop. I still geek out on all this stuff after 10 plus years in the space, and I'm happy to share my knowledge with anybody who's interested enough in hearing it.
Robert, I think what you're doing is great and very helpful, because and I really appreciate also what your approach is, because I'll share that your approach is an advisor to brands to help them go through the process and select the right partner from them. And I know others that do this as well. And the way they do this as a free service for the brands, but is there really anything free? They're getting paid from the agency side. And so I would say that can be a little bit more biased. Maybe not, but it could be a little bit more biased, where you are working with the brand and being their advocate and sitting on the same side. And I believe taking a more unbiased approach to making sure you select the right partner, because you don't necessarily need to have a referral partnership agreement with that agency in order to recommend them. And I think when you're sitting on that side and you're coming from that perspective, you're very, very much aligned with the needs of the brand. And yeah, I would highly recommend to anybody who is looking for a solution in their business, that you reach out to Robert and work together towards finding what the right partner is. You obviously have been in the space a long time, and you know a lot of people. We would love to audit a brand, be part of that process. But again, we also want to make sure that we're the right fit for the agency. Thank
you so much for that. Really appreciate you guys having me. And again, reach out to either of us with any questions you may have. And we hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.